Chosen one. You have someone feeling like the biggest fool on the planet right now because they completely destroyed the best thing that ever happened to them. You've left them sitting there realizing they had pure gold in their hands and threw it away like garbage, and now everyone around them is calling them exactly what they are, a complete loser who couldn't recognize treasure when you were loving them unconditionally. Right now you're entering this connection as pure light incarnate, ready to pour liquid gold into what you believe is a worthy vessel. Your heart is a perpetual fountain of love, and you're about to discover exactly what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness, generosity for gullibility. You're choosing to love legendarily, to see potential everywhere, to believe in transformation with the faith of someone who has never been truly betrayed. You're building what you think will be a castle of mutual devotion, completely unaware that someone is secretly designing a psychological trap meant to capture and dim your brilliance. The story you're about to live will become legend among everyone who witnesses it, a cautionary tale and an inspiration rolled into one dramatic narrative. But first you have to walk through the fire that will forge you into something unbreakable, something magnificent. The universe is taking notes with the precision of a cosmic accountant. The scales of justice are about to tip in ways that will shock everyone involved, including you, and somewhere in the future, a reckoning is building that will make their current confidence look like the last breath of someone drowning in their own arrogance. Every morning you woke up choosing to believe in magic, convinced your love could heal broken spirits and transform damaged souls. You decided to show up as your highest self, radiating warmth that was impossible to fake or manufacture. Your energy was like premium gasoline being poured into what you thought was a high-performance engine. You chose to love at a level that made friends wonder where such devotion came from. You poured authenticity into every interaction, genuine care into every gesture, real hope into every tomorrow you imagined together. Your love was the kind that poets dream about receiving, and philosophers spend lifetimes trying to understand. The investment seemed solid at first. The returns looked promising enough to keep you interested. You were getting just enough positive feedback to believe your strategy was working, unaware that someone was studying your generosity like a predator, learning their praise patterns, cataloging your kindness for future exploitation. What you couldn't see yet was the careful documentation happening behind your back. Every act of kindness was being cataloged, not with gratitude, but with cold calculation. Every moment of vulnerability was being stored for future use against you, like weapons in an emotional arsenal. The beautiful irony building in the background was this: while you were genuinely investing in their growth with pure intentions, they were accidentally creating the very evidence that would later destroy their reputation completely. Every manipulative move was being recorded by the universe itself. Your love was pure platinum, your intentions noble gold, your heart wide open like a sunflower following the light. The stage was being set for the most dramatic reversal of fortune anyone in your circle would ever witness, a story that would be told and retold for years to come. Something subtle shifted in your awareness, like a photographer slowly adjusting their lens until a blurry image becomes crystal clear. You began noticing patterns that made your investor's intuition start sending warning signals. You started recognizing how your voice was shrinking in conversations, not by accident, but through systematic dismissal. Your opinions began carrying less weight because someone was consistently treating them as less valuable than their own thoughts. The documentation phase of your awakening began unconsciously. You found yourself mentally noting when your independence was reframed as selfishness. You observed how your friendships were being labeled as distractions and your dreams transformed into unrealistic expectations. You began understanding that someone was building walls to block your light instead of stepping into the sunshine with you. Each restriction came wrapped in fake concern, every limitation disguised as protection. The gaslighting masterclass was in full session, and you were becoming an unwilling student of manipulation tactics. Reality was becoming negotiable, your memory unreliable, your feelings overreactions. Something crucial was happening beneath your conscious awareness, though. Your soul was keeping meticulous records, documenting every inequality, every dismissal, every moment when love was given but not returned. The cosmic accountant was building a case file that would soon be presented to the universe for judgment. You weren't just experiencing manipulation, you were gathering evidence. And that evidence was about to become the foundation for the most spectacular liberation story anyone would ever witness. You decided to do something that would change everything. You started calculating the emotional mathematics of your relationship. The results were so shocking, they triggered an awakening you hadn't seen coming. The spreadsheet of give and take revealed numbers that made your heart stop. You were making daily deposits into an emotional bank that never showed a balance, never paid interest, never acknowledged your contributions. You realized you'd been showing up like a five-star restaurant serving gourmet love on fine china, while accepting fast food scraps on paper plates in return, when you got fed at all. The pattern became undeniable once you started looking for it. Every birthday somehow became about their comfort. Every achievement of yours was overshadowed by their drama. Every moment you needed support was transformed into an inconvenience for them. The Obsidian inner order isn't for everyone. It's for the ones who walked through hell smiling and came out glowing. You didn't come here to be liked. You came here to remember who you are, and we remember with you. This isn't a community. It's a war room for the spiritually elite, a headquarters for timeline jumpers, curse breakers, and reality benders. Every weekly Zoom call is a live frequency upgrade, where dragons speak, codes unlock, and the veil lifts. You'll get access to elite downloads, energetic technologies, and ancient transmissions that were never meant for the masses. Because let's be real, most people can't handle what you carry. Inside, you don't heal, you resurrect, you reclaim, you reign. Click the link in the description. If you're tired of surface-level fluff and ready to sit at the table of the anointed, then welcome to the Obsidian Inner Order, where you become the source. You recognized you'd become an emotional ATM, available 24/7 for withdrawals while never receiving deposits. The transaction history was devastating. Endless debits, zero credits, overdraft fees charged to your spirit. This audit was the beginning of something they had no idea was coming. Your soul wasn't just keeping records anymore. It was building a legal case for independence that would be impossible to argue against. The most beautiful part was how naturally you'd adjusted to this imbalance, how quickly you'd learned to shrink your needs to accommodate their endless wants. That recognition was about to fuel a transformation that would shock everyone, especially you. The evidence was mounting. The case was building, and somewhere in your future, a courtroom drama was about to unfold that would leave them completely exposed. You began recognizing how your own love was being twisted into a weapon against you. Every ounce of devotion you offered was being catalogued and transformed into ammunition for their control arsenal. The patterns became visible once you knew what to look for. Your loyalty was being used as evidence that you couldn't function without them. Your kindness was being twisted into proof that you were too soft for the real world. You started seeing how calculated the verbal warfare really was. Each cutting remark was designed to hit specific vulnerabilities they'd studied like a general mapping enemy weaknesses. Your confidence had become their target practice. You noticed how your independence was being treated like treason in their personal kingdom. Every friend you maintained was labeled a threat. Every hobby you enjoyed was time taken away from the relationship. The systematic dismantling of your voice became obvious once you were looking for it. Conversations had become monologues. Disagreements had become lectures. Your perspective had become wrong by default. What they didn't realize was that you were absorbing more than just their manipulation. You were learning their entire playbook. Every tactic they used was being studied, understood, and mentally filed away for future reference. Deep in your core, something was stirring that they had no experience with. The chosen one in you was preparing for an awakening that would render every manipulation tactic they'd perfected completely useless. The student was about to become the master, and the lesson they were about to receive would be more expensive than anything they'd ever paid for in their life. This is the moment that will haunt them forever. The day you almost chose to stay, to keep trying, to give them one more chance to value what they had. The moment when their victory was within reach, and they decided to grab for even more control. You were standing at the crossroads of decision, genuinely considering whether love could overcome the patterns you'd identified. Part of you wanted to believe that your investment could still pay off, that your love could still transform them. They sensed your hesitation and made the fatal error of interpreting your patience as permanent submission. Instead of gratitude for your consideration, they doubled down on control tactics. Instead of appreciation for your loyalty, they demanded even more surrender. That day they pushed one boundary too far, demanded one compromise too many, dismissed one feeling too often. They had you in their grasp and decided to squeeze tighter, not knowing they were about to crush their own happiness. You felt something crystallize in that moment, a clarity so sharp it cut through years of confusion like light piercing darkness. The choice became obvious, inevitable, and absolutely final. What they experienced as winning the argument was actually losing the war. What felt like successful control was actually successful destruction of their own future happiness. The irony was cosmic in its proportions. At the exact moment they thought they'd secured permanent dominance over you, they had actually triggered the awakening that would set you free forever. This was the day they lost everything, even though they wouldn't realize it for weeks. Then it happened, the moment that split your life into before and after. Lightning struck your awareness with such force that everything changed instantly, completely, irreversibly. You chose to feel your power returning like blood flowing back into a limb that had been numb for too long. The sensation was overwhelming, undeniable, and absolutely terrifying to someone who had grown comfortable with your submission. The spell shattered like glass hitting concrete. Every manipulation tactic they'd perfected suddenly looked transparent and pathetic. You could see the strings being pulled, the buttons being pushed, the fear being manufactured. You made a profound decision in that moment. You didn't have to participate in your own diminishment. The revelation was so simple, it was revolutionary. Your inner voice, the one that had been whispered into silence, roared back to life with the force of 1,000 storms. You remembered who you were before anyone convinced you to forget. The transformation was immediate and visible. Something in your energy shifted so dramatically that they could feel it in the room. The person they thought they controlled was suddenly, completely unavailable for their games. You made the choice that sent shockwaves through their entire reality. You chose yourself, not eventually, not after more chances, not after they changed, immediately, completely, permanently. What they were witnessing was the birth of someone they had no power over, someone who could see through every tactic they'd ever used. Their entire playbook had become useless overnight. The awakening was complete. There was no going back to sleep. You didn't just leave, you evaporated from their sphere of control so completely that they questioned whether you'd ever really been there at all. Your exit was surgical in its precision. No dramatic speeches, no ultimatums, no negotiations. You simply ceased to be available for their games, and the silence was more devastating than any argument could have been. You chose to become unreachable in every way that mattered. Physically absent, emotionally unavailable, spiritually unreachable. You had removed yourself from their reality so completely that all their manipulation tactics became tools trying to affect empty air. The panic in their eyes was immediate and visible. This wasn't a temporary tantrum or a dramatic gesture. You were actually genuinely gone, and no amount of strategy could bring you back. Your absence created a vacuum that exposed everything ugly about their character. Without you there to absorb their toxicity, it had nowhere to go but back to them. The reflection was brutal. People started noticing things immediately. How much lighter the atmosphere became without their drama. How much more peaceful gatherings were without their need to control every conversation. You had discovered something that terrified them to their core. All their power had been borrowed from your willingness to participate, and you had revoked their access permanently. The most beautiful part was watching them scramble to understand how someone they thought they owned had simply chosen to belong to themselves instead. While they were panicking about your departure, something else was happening that they hadn't anticipated. People were talking, and the conversations weren't going in their favor. The whispers started immediately, but not cruel gossip. These were the shocked conversations that happen when people witness someone throw away something obviously valuable. Friends began connecting dots they'd ignored while you were together. Your absence illuminated behaviors that had been normalized in your presence, and the contrast was stark and undeniable. Their reputation shifted overnight from person in a relationship to person who lost the best thing that ever happened to them. The transformation was swift, unanimous and brutal in its honesty. Dinner conversations began including them as cautionary tales. Remember how they treated their ex? Can you believe they lost someone that amazing? The stories spread because the truth was impossible to ignore. Social media became a minefield. Every happy post you made, every success you celebrated became evidence of their colossal mistake. The algorithm seemed designed to remind them of what they'd lost. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who couldn't recognize value when it was sitting right in front of them. They became the person others pointed to when explaining red flags in relationships. The laughter wasn't even cruel. It was the kind of disbelieving amazement people express when witnessing spectacular failure at simple tasks, like watching someone starve while sitting at a feast. While their world crumbled in real time, yours rebuilt itself into something more magnificent than it had ever been. The contrast wasn't just noticeable, it was shocking in its dramatic reversal. You chose to let success flow toward you like water finding its natural level. Opportunities that had been blocked during your time with them suddenly opened up like flowers in spring. Your energy shifted so dramatically that strangers began commenting on the transformation. The light that had been dimmed by their presence was now shining at full brightness, attracting abundance from every direction. Professional achievements multiplied, personal relationships deepened, creative projects flourished, health improved, finances stabilized. Every area of your life began reflecting the positive change that came from removing their negative influence. The happiness wasn't performed, it was genuine joy radiating from someone who had remembered their worth and chosen to honor it. People could see the difference from across the room. Your social media became a highlight reel of someone living their best life, and everyone could see that this transformation coincided perfectly with their absence from your world. Friends started using you as an example of what was possible when someone chose themselves over toxicity. Your story became inspiration for others trapped in similar situations. The most devastating part for them was watching you thrive without any effort to reconnect or repair what had been broken. Your success proved that their presence had been a limitation, not an asset. This is where their nightmare reached its crescendo. The social consequences that had been building like storm clouds finally broke open, drenching them in judgment from every direction. Other victims of their manipulation began finding their voices, comparing notes, realizing they weren't alone in their experiences. The pattern became undeniable, even to people who had previously made excuses for their behavior. Professional consequences followed personal ones. Their reputation for being difficult, controlling and emotionally unstable began affecting their career prospects. Word travels fast about people who destroy their own blessings. Family members started distancing themselves after witnessing the contrast between your grace during the relationship and their desperation after it ended. The picture was crystal clear about who the real problem had been. Legal issues arose from their increasingly erratic behavior. Harassment, stalking, property damage. The consequences of their inability to accept reality started creating serious liability. Health problems emerged from the stress of facing consequences they'd never imagined possible. The body keeps score, and their score was being tallied with devastating accuracy. Every area of their life began reflecting the energy they'd put out during your relationship. The universe was serving them exactly what they'd earned, and the taste was bitter beyond imagination. The isolation was complete. The fall from grace was total, and you were nowhere to be found to help them process what they'd done to themselves. Months after you left, the moment that was foreshadowed in the opening finally arrived with devastating precision. They found themselves sitting in a room full of people who used to respect them, listening as every single person called them the biggest fool who ever lived. The intervention wasn't planned. It was organic, like a dam bursting under pressure. Friends, family, colleagues, everyone who had witnessed their behavior could no longer pretend it was acceptable. The confrontation was unanimous, devastating, and long overdue. You had everything, they said, voices filled with disgust and disbelief. You had someone who loved you unconditionally, and you threw it away for what? Control, ego, power. Look at yourself now. Look at what you've become. The words hit like physical blows. Each person took turns holding up the mirror, forcing them to see what everyone else had recognized. They had destroyed their own happiness through character flaws they could no longer deny, rationalize, or blame on anyone else. Their mother's voice was perhaps the most crushing. "I raised you better than this. That person was a gift, and you treated them like garbage. I'm ashamed of who you've become." The silence that followed was deafening. They begged for just one more chance to undo their mistake, their voice breaking as they pleaded for someone, anyone, to help them fix what they'd broken. But everyone in the room knew the same truth. You were never coming back, and you were never supposed to. The breakdown was complete, emotional, social, professional, spiritual. Every consequence they were experiencing had been earned through their own choices, their own actions, their own character. There was no one left to blame, no excuse left to make, no reality left to deny. While they sat in that room being confronted with their failures, facing the unanimous judgment of everyone who mattered in their life, you were somewhere else entirely, living a life so beautiful it would have been unimaginable when you were trapped in their psychological prison. The cosmic justice was perfect in its symmetry, brutal in its completeness. While they faced their reckoning in that room full of disappointed faces, you were experiencing something they could never understand. The complete freedom that comes from choosing yourself over someone who didn't deserve you, couldn't appreciate you, and never would. You had relocated, both physically and spiritually, to a space where their negative energy couldn't reach. Your new environment reflected your authentic self in ways that had been impossible when you were dimming your light for their comfort, shrinking your dreams for their ego, silencing your voice for their peace. The emotional freedom was the most beautiful part of your transformation. When friends mentioned their name, you felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even curiosity about their current state. They had achieved complete irrelevance in your emotional landscape, like a song that once played constantly but now couldn't even trigger a memory. Your heart had become like a house after complete renovation, clean, spacious, beautifully decorated, and ready for connections that would actually appreciate what they found there. The space they used to occupy was now filled with dreams, plans, genuine happiness, and people who deserved your energy. Success continued flowing toward you in ways that seemed almost magical to outside observers. Career opportunities multiplied like flowers in spring. Financial abundance stabilized and grew. Creative projects flourished with an energy that had been suppressed for too long. Every opportunity, every blessing, every moment of joy served as evidence that you had made the right choice in leaving. Your story became legend among people who knew you both. The chosen one who had recognized their worth and chosen freedom over familiar pain. The treasure who had refused to stay buried under someone else's insecurities. The phoenix who had risen from the ashes of a toxic connection more beautiful than ever before. The peace was profound and unshakable because it was built on self-respect rather than external validation. You had found something they could never take from you, the ability to be complete without them, happy without their approval, successful without their permission. People would ask how you'd done it, how you transformed so completely. The answer was simple: you'd stopped accepting less than you deserved and started giving yourself everything you'd been trying to give them. The story came full circle with perfect cosmic symmetry. They had lost everything they thought they could never lose, while you had gained everything you thought was impossible. Your liberation sparked a movement among people who had been accepting less than they deserved. Your example became proof that freedom was possible for anyone brave enough to choose it. Support groups began using your experience as a case study in successful liberation. Therapists referenced your journey when helping clients visualize what life could look like after choosing themselves. The person who lost you became a cautionary tale told at dinner parties, a reminder whispered among friends: don't ever take good love for granted because it will walk away and find someone who appreciates it. You had proven that toxic people only have power over those who participate in the dynamic. The moment someone chooses to stop playing the game ends, and the toxic person is left playing alone. Your story became evidence that chosen ones always find their way back to their power, no matter how long they've been suppressed or controlled. A few more months later, they were still sitting in rooms full of people who had lost respect for them, still being reminded of what they'd lost, still facing consequences for choices they could never undo. The intervention had become a monthly occurrence as different groups of people took turns trying to help them understand the magnitude of their mistake. You were building a life so beautiful it would have been unimaginable during your darkest moments with them. Every day brought new evidence that you had made the right choice, that freedom was worth every moment of discomfort it had cost you to achieve. The mathematical impossibility of their situation became clear to everyone who knew the story. The chances of finding someone like you, someone willing to love them despite their flaws, someone capable of the devotion you'd offered, those odds made winning the lottery look like a sure bet. They spent their days knowing they'd had everything they needed for happiness, and had thrown it away for the temporary satisfaction of feeling superior to someone who was actually superior to them in every way that mattered. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Your story proved that happy endings are real when you have the courage to write them yourself. That liberation is always possible for those willing to choose themselves over toxicity. That love, real love, never stays where it isn't appreciated, honored, or reciprocated. The universe had served perfect justice with the precision of a cosmic accountant. Those who honor their worth attract experiences that reflect it, while those who destroy their blessings earn exactly what their actions deserve. The scales had balanced perfectly. The chosen one had chosen wisely. The treasure had found its proper home, and the person who couldn't recognize value when it lived in their house spent the rest of their days being reminded by everyone around them what it looks like to lose everything that matters. Years would pass, and they would still be telling people about the one who got away, never quite understanding that you didn't get away, you were set free by their own actions. You had become the standard by which they measured every subsequent connection, and everyone fell short because no one could compare to what they'd destroyed. Meanwhile, you continued ascending to heights they could never reach, surrounded by people who cherished your light instead of trying to dim it, building a legacy of love that honored your true worth. Take care of yourself, chosen one. Your story proves that the best revenge is a life so beautiful it becomes proof that leaving was the right choice,